The areas that generative AI really address is anything that's good at generating human-like text, answering questions, writing stories, creating poetry, etc. Great for language translation and summarization. In terms of just tooling out there, I mean, everybody probably on the call or listening to this understands ChatGPT or use ChatGPT in some aspect, but that's just one of many tools on the market. There's tools like Legal Robot. Legal Robot helps with legalese, for example, and that's been trained on a corpus of legal contracts that you can use to summarize and answer questions. There's other tools that are part of OpenAI's library of tools, which does data analysis. And data analysis is a plugin for, I guess, the ChatGPT tool that allows companies to actually analyze data, build graphs, etc., kind of similar to a data scientist. The real takeaway for anybody listening here is to have this term of a co-pilot for your different tasks and augment your work with one of these tools, whether it's legal, a chat tool or whatnot, that will help you accomplish that task. So you shouldn't be now, for example, in the context of deals, if you're doing very simple example, say there was a waste management company that came in and you got an investment thesis of that, and you wanted to do some M&A research on like valuation and comps and other things. Obviously you go to the usual sources, Owler, PitchBook, Sourcescrub maybe, and other sources like that to get your thesis and your comps down. But then you want to do comparable analysis, and that normally takes a long time, a lot of web searches. Well, there's tools available now that you can actually scrape those websites and actually analyze, ask questions across different types of, say, waste management companies and simplify that process. Just that one piece and analyzing data like that scale really just saves a ton of time. It just makes the individual more productive. And then hopefully you could do one deal a month. Maybe you can do 2 deals or 3 deals a month and do the same kind of output. And that's how I would look at this as a productivity gain, at least for the next 3 to 5 years. There's not going to be total automation. I think that's a fool's errand initially anyway, because there's a lot of human in the loop requirements and regulation and other things that companies need to adhere to. So if I was looking at an M&A deal, say a SaaS company, I gave some examples earlier of, some legal tools out there. There's some generalized tools, chat tools, etc. But M&A for a SaaS company, one of the big areas of most P&L statements will be the engineering function, especially in a SaaS company. There's areas that you can't get around, like hosting costs, things like that. But the engineering part of that equation, these tools from Microsoft has one called GitHub Copilot, and Amazon has something called Code Whisperer. Essentially what these tools do, they're generative AI tools. They've been trained on a corpus of coding examples, millions and millions of billions of those. And it enables their engineers to use these tools and generate code. And effectively, the statistics are it makes the developers, the engineers, like 50% more productive. And if you think about that from like just a SaaS kind of point of view from your P&L, you can look at that and go, okay, if they're not using those tools and I have some data around the productivity gains, potentially that's a playbook I can quickly put in place for that company. Maybe give their engineers some training, maybe get in a vendor like GitHub or Amazon or whoever to get their team using these tools, and then they can measure the output. And then straight away, maybe they've got some open recs that they need to fill. Maybe they can close those recs. They can do the same amount of output with the same team, or even optimize that team slightly. So from an M&A and just a deal basis, that's a quick win. If you can kind of then look at other types of companies from an M&A point of view, what is the essence of the company? Where's their business? If it falls into category of, say, content generation, it's a broad category. I explained earlier, like the SaaS is kind of, your SaaS tool, but behind the scenes, you've got code in, they're doing content generation. Code is content, but content generation in terms like, maybe they're doing a newspaper publication or maybe it's a travel agency, they're doing a lot of content, web content or media and other things. That's in a real area that can be optimized. ChatGPT is just one piece, which is text. I mentioned earlier coding. We can actually generate pictures as well. There's tools like DALL-E 2 that allows you to generate pictures based on just text. Like, hey, I want a picture of a beach or whatever it is. And And again, that's going to lower the cost of generating those pieces in that business or a content generation type company. And if you, again, look at that from like a unit economics point of view, the cost will be considerably less. But again, in an M&A point of view, it's coming up with a playbook and understanding what these tools are and what the impact is for those jobs, and then understanding, is it what is the training requirement and what's the ramp to get that gain of that productivity. Normally you do that in the first 100 days in most acquisitions, but having those kind of Gen AI playbooks ready to go, I think that could really add a lot of value to some of these deals, especially for the PE firms or VCs that are doing that. I think we're at a real moment in time that is going to, I've been saying it, I've been in this AI ML game for 10 years now. I've been in the cloud space since the cloud started. I said the same thing about cloud. The cloud is going to change everything. And if you look at that trend, cloud, and you kind of equate it to this trend, the cloud, when that first started, I think it was McKinsey, they came up with a report that it will produce $1 trillion worth of value. When they did this report, I think it was like 2006 or 2007, it turns out the cloud actually produced 7 trillion of value across different aspects. Now, this report's out that it's actually 7 trillion that McKinsey and others are kind of predicting around this trend, which is this new generative AI trend. So you think about that in terms of what will happen. That is a massive number and very disruptive. And I think what will happen with a lot of companies is you'll have two categories of companies. You'll have the true digital native companies where they're AI first, where they've grown their business with those principles of AI, using these tooling for automation. They're not going to write systems traditionally that will do some of the manual work that they might do in that business, like accounting or back office or content generation, like I mentioned earlier. So they'll be super efficient. They'll go from, say, 100 people company in today's sense down to, say, 10 people that will have the fully functions of most companies like marketing, sales, human resources, etc., with a minimum amount of people. And you think about that from, the expansion, that's just going to be a very profitable business that they can get into and disrupt a lot of the players. That's one type. The second type will be, the incumbents, the companies that are around today. And I think my thought is, if there's not real, innovation leadership in those companies, the trend with, S&P 500, will keep on going on, where, most S&P 500 don't stay in the S&P 500 for very long. I think the trend is like 20, 30 years, and then they drop off. I think that's what you'll see some major players like blockbuster type downfalls of businesses where they've these smaller digital native incumbents that will come in and change this kind of ecosystem pretty fast. I mentioned earlier, like legal is a great ripe disruption right there. If you had a legal firm that was at its heart changing the way they bill out clients, so instead of doing hourly based billing, they can do it based on contract or service based billing. They could really change and actually go against a lot of these like traditional law firms that might charge, say, $10,000, $20,000, $100,000 for just contract reviewing services, whereas a smaller company could just do that for cents on the dollar and actually automate that completely. And it's the same with those types of business in terms of, healthcare could be the same too, right? You could have a simple healthcare type interaction with insurance, and maybe an agent-based system where maybe you submit your claims, and behind the scenes it's using generative AI to read those claim submissions and it will update the back-end systems in an automated way that a claim processor would do. And again, for that company that is digital native and has that in place, they'll lower the cost of that type of function, maybe from $10 per claim to a few cents. I think this is going to be a journey for a lot of companies, and there'll be losers like in any trend, but there'll be a lot of these like multi-trillion-dollar businesses I think will pop up from this new wave. The new Googles, the new Facebooks will appear. I think one of the downside risks is the ethical downsides. Well, I say downsides, but the ethical concerns of some of these tools. There's a recent executive order that Biden did around AI that was about the regulation of AI, and some of the downsides, just the ethical concerns of how these very advanced models respond back to certain questions of a business and whether they're biased or not biased, or are they hallucinating? Maybe they don't give you an accurate answer. Putting your faith in these tools and suddenly they're not giving you the right answer. I mean, humans do make mistakes as well, but these could be catastrophic mistakes that will really affect the business. So that's one of the kind of concerns, is to understand the ethical use and also what the limitations are of the current wave that's going through. The other aspect, I think, is understanding the assets of the businesses that they're acquiring and not being left with an empty business. And if you look at any company, like I said earlier, a content generation company or these other types of companies, what is their core value? And the core value is normally their data. So having a strategy around understanding that data, monetizing that data, and then maybe protecting that data in terms of the moat around the business will really help with growing that. And then the other side of that equation is if there's other companies that have used that company's data without the right permissions and they're building their own systems that compete in, then it's understanding that and being just defensive and maybe doing a cease and desist, but understanding if that is happening and if they're using your data for whatever reason. I think that's a definite concern for a lot of companies. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities and there's some downside risk potentially that needs to be mitigated in any plan. The example of the claim processor, and that's a great example. It's been around for a long time, but if you have 10 claims that come in, and they're all different types of claims, and you build this thing that's going to reject a claim maybe based on that data. Why are we giving that to that thing to do that, like the AI to do that? And then obviously they will look at the claims and go, well, if we can not pay this one, which might be a diabetic patient or maybe a cancer patient or somebody like that who needs that claim to be approved, or actually have what I call EQ, which I think is the AI never will have, right? And I think if you have the human in the loop system and not just let this thing make that decision without having the ethical responsibility that businesses should have, then you will solve that. But generally, if you give AI that kind of true and false type of scenario, they will go after those high cost claims maybe in that scenario, or even credit decisions maybe in a financial firm. Like maybe there's somebody who's trying to get a loan and they don't fit the profile and never will do. So they need somebody who would have to approve that. And if you just give AI the control, the automation, without having humans, I think that's going to miss a lot of potential brand impact of businesses, as well as ethical concerns around the usage of AI. There's a number of resources out there for training. Coursera has a number of courses, LinkedIn Learning has courses, and they're all different types of areas geared towards business leaders to technical folks. I would first off try to incorporate training in 2023, early 2024 as a priority across the business to get everybody to understand what the core is of this technology, what it means and how to apply it. That's the first stage. The second stage is doing an inventory analysis. So a lot of companies are under ISO, which requires you to do a lot of process, documentation and other things. So getting an inventory of all the systems and all the processes you have in your business and identifying wins processes. And wins, the acronym, is anything that's word, images, numbers, or sounds. And those types of processes, so like I mentioned earlier, like a legal process, that's words. Accountancy is numbers. Images, marketing, sounds could be marketing again, or maybe a transcription or something like that. Identifying those areas in all your business processes would be great. And then also, what is the subjective cost, unit economics of each of those functions, right? If you can just quantify that. And then it's really then stack ranking that to understand what those use cases could be for the business. And then it's just simply the third stage of this is to produce an innovation center of excellence within the business. So actually bringing together different business leaders around how do we innovate with generative AI or AI in general around this. And here's some use cases that we think might apply, but can you go back to your teams based on this and come up with some use cases that we can then have as our central unit and then build those out and deploy them. And I think it's a great exercise just to get one workload in production based on that. So within, say, 6 to 12 months, have a functioning use case in production, whether it's you've built it yourself or you've acquired some, or you've signed up for some SaaS tool or whatever, and then just measure that. And then what is the productivity gain? We said the baseline was here. This costs us $1 or $20 to do this process. With this new generative AI tool, it's cost us 1 cent. That's a great ROI. And then we can go back to the leadership team and say, we've got 100 use cases that we want to go after now. And we think based on that one use case, the ROI of the business will be X. So I think it's like a very simple crawl, walk, run process that businesses need to undertake. Definitely looking at your resources of your business, identifying advocates in the business that they're blogging, they're doing LinkedIn posts, they're always talking about AI. Maybe they'll be good folks to have in this center of excellence innovation group that can drive this across the business.